And yeah, part of it. Yep, big part of it. So when you're dealing with probability, we were looking at ratio expression of probability or percent. Now when you do the ratio, what's the top and what does the top represent and what does the bottom represent? Yeah, you might have seen this when you were reading about it.
Number of times it's like likely to occur out of how many times you try it.
That's a really good way to say it. I like that. Exactly. That's almost perfect there. So when I say, like, if I flip a coin, please stop with the plastic. Thank you. When you flip a coin and I say, what's the probability of getting heads? What's the chance of getting heads?
1/2.
1/2. The 1 represents how many different ways can you get a head? Get a heads. 1. How many different outcomes are there when you flip a coin? 2. So the bottom is the total number of outcomes over the number of outcomes you want. Does that kind of make sense? So when flipping a coin once, how many outcomes can it be? It can be heads or tails. How many outcomes is that? 2. But if you want it to just be heads, what's the number of desirable outcomes? 1. It's just 1. It's just 1. And what was the thing I told you about the coin? I think I told you there was an equal chance of it being heads or tails. Someone asked about that. Yeah. Yes, we're just assuming it's equal. Sometimes is it not? Sometimes it's like, 50.000001% and then 49.00999999%. We're assuming 50-50, right? And what did I say? What was it if you flip it 5 times, no heads? What was that? Do you remember? It was 1 out of 32. Do you remember what it was for 1 head? Exactly 1 head? It was 5 out of 32. That's correct. Got it. Now, do you remember where the 5/32 came from? Yeah, you have to be really careful about how you describe what's going on. There's 5 different ways in which you can get heads, right? Here's one way you could get heads. It could be heads first and then what? Or you could have like this, right? Or what could you have? Heads, tails, 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 heads, tails, 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 heads, right? There are 5 ways. How many different ways can you flip? So remember what I said about probability? What was it? It was the number of outcomes you want over the total number of outcomes. How many outcomes are there that we want? Well, no, how many outcomes do we want? There's 5 of them, right? But how many total are there? There's 32 of them. So what's the probability? 5/32. There's 2 ways on certain probability questions to go about working on them. One is to actually count the things. Sometimes is counting the things possible and pretty easy? Yes. Sometimes is it totally impossible to just count them? Yeah, and you have to do it algebraically. The algebraic method is more powerful because it can be expanded to more different methods. Yes, Kevin?
How would you find 32 if, say, it was like a bigger number than 5?
So where did 32 come from? Does anybody remember where 32 comes from? So you guys did this out and you figured out it was 32. Did anybody figure out where 32 came from? Yeah. Well, how about this? There's the first, okay, look. There's the first coin flip, there's the second coin flip, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. How many different, could this be, this can be heads or tails, right? This can be heads or tails. What can this be? Heads or tails? Oh, it's the same thing, right? So how many different outcomes are there for each slot? 2. That's right. There's 2, 2, 2, 2, and 2. So what do you do with all those numbers to find the total number of outcomes? This is 2 to the 5th, which is 32. Right. To get back to your question, though, what happens as you flip the coin more times? It does get a little harder because can you suddenly list them out? No. You have to do it algebraically. You have to do it algebraically. So I have a question for you, and you can state the answer any way you want. If I flipped a coin 10 times, what's the chance of getting no heads? So how many ways can you get no heads?
2.
No. How many ways can you get no heads? 1. There's only 1 way to get no heads, right? You don't get any. 1 over what? If I flip it 10 times? 2 to the 10th. Exactly. That's the chance of no heads. That's also the chance of no what? No tails, right? So that's another thing to realize when you're working with coin flipping problems.